you beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Integration Station. I've got a wonderful guest backstage. I'm just about to bring him on now. Simon, who has been doing all the beautiful artwork behind the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference and so much more. He's a visionary artist doing so many other cool things. So before I mess up anything else, I'm just going to bring Simon on so he can give the intro and share what's inspired him to get into this world. Hi, Simon. Welcome.
Hey. How you doing?
Oh, pretty well. Yeah, I've been excited to have you on here. Just, you know, your artwork is just so beautiful. I used it in like different captions and things like that too myself. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other people out there who've been exposed to your artwork and just not sure who's behind it and vice versa. So people who may know you but may not know everything that you're about. So I really wanted to have you on so we could dive into all of this, as well as, of course, being the Integration Station, how art is helping in your own integration practice and how it may inspire others to bring on this tool and these techniques for their own integration purposes. So thank you for being here. Please dive in.
Okay, yeah, well, an introduction then, I guess, about myself. I'm a multimedia artist. I work with different forms of visual art, from traditional painting and drawing mediums to digital mediums, digital painting, graphic design. I also do animation and motion graphics, and I make music. I play various kinds of music. I make music on the computer, different kinds of down-tempo ambient music. I also play various instruments. I've been in various bands playing bass, cello, other things, guitar. So kind of all around multimedia artist. And I combine a lot of my mediums together, the music and the art. And I have a concert called Metagrove that we'll probably talk about, where I'm combining all these things together in a live audiovisual performance. And I've been doing this type of creativity, the visionary art, for around 20 years now. And yeah, I live in Canada, British Columbia, Canada. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm really curious, you know, what inspired you to get into this 20 years ago? How did it come about? Was it something that was kind of always there, or what sparked that creativity, the inspiration inside?
Yeah, I had what I would call an awakening experience through psychedelics. I'd been dabbling with them in high school. That was in the late 90s, and kind of more in a party way or whatever, random scenarios. And I started getting a bit more intentional about it around 2003 with a friend. Actually, he was the one that suggested we have to do this LSD and listen to all the Tool albums only on repeat. And I was like, all right, sign me up. And so I put out a big piece of paper. It was my idea, like, well, we got to have something, you know, something to draw on. So I just put out this huge poster sheet of paper with some Sharpies, keep it simple. And it led to a series of these intentional settings that we did. I know that, like, now when I think of intentional, like now what I would do would be maybe even more ceremonial, but for a 22-year-old at that time, that was more intentional than just getting high at parties. But what it did do is it really opened me up to a whole other way of experiencing music and art in this way, where it was like a bit more of an active participant in the scenario. And then it ultimately led to a specific situation where we were doing this, and I had an outer body experience. We both left our bodies and we transfigured into what I describe as particles of light, into the universal mind lattice, an interwoven network of pure plasma energy, totally full of love and seemingly so familiar, like incredibly familiar. We were able to travel anywhere. It seemed connected to everything. And there were a lot of really fascinating details in that experience. I won't go into it all, but it was quite profound. And I left I was left coming out of it feeling like my third eye specifically and heart were totally open in this way that I'd never experienced before. Like having a visceral experience of like, oh, there's these energy centers here. Like there's these muscles I've never used. Like if you go for a run with like barefoot shoes compared to not or something, you might feel like totally different muscles used. You could use any example, but that's what it was like. And it was a really deep experience that led me to connecting to a group of visionary artists that were traveling at that time in Canada at festivals. And I had just done some visionary art paintings. Like I didn't even really know honestly what visionary art or barely what psychedelic art was at the time. I just expressed my experiences on a canvas, which were very different than anything I'd done before. And they saw them and they were like, wow, yeah, you get it. All right, you're on board. And I started traveling with them in, right from 2004 to 2006. And it's just been a continual progression since then.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And so, like, why do you think that this is, like so important for other people to do today, to be able to express those kinds of experiences in some way or another? Music being so healing, and art being such another way of just expressing, and it is a type of healing too. It's getting out of, like, so many people have such a hard time letting go. These are two really great examples of how you can do that and make something beautiful. Give what you need to let go of purpose, give what you're seeing, another outlet that maybe even connects others.
Yeah, I've been making art my whole life, art and music, and the experience of doing it while on psychedelics, one of the primary things that happened to me at that time was I noticed a lot of automatic movements. I just sort of just let my hand be guided by the music more so. And I remember feeling like it was like I was drawing sound for the first time. I was like, oh, this is what sound looks like. So the lines didn't have a lot of definition, say, compared to drawing like real life subjects, but I just allowed myself to explore what that meant. And really, if you were to look at it now, I have photos of them. I might even still have the originals somewhere. They just look like a total mess of scribbles. My friend was drawing on one other side. But of course, when you're on 3 tabs of acid and you're having this whole experience, like every line and every intersection of lines can become a whole other world.
Yeah.
And it opens up the imagination to these other realms of what's possible, what we're experiencing here and what could be experienced, and creativity becomes more than I had conceived previously. So for me, being able to express that and explore it, and then also refine it, like practice what it means to take those scribbles into something that then is like a more, actually, to me, a tangible language that other people could recognize and say, hey, I've experienced that, I've been there, I feel that as an experience I've had. That meant a lot to me, to be able to integrate it and refine it in such a way so it wasn't just scribbles on a page.
Yeah, I like that too. It's I do a similar thing when I'm journaling. It's like I'll get everything out that needs to get out, and I just explore it, like whatever it is. It's just dribble. It doesn't mean anything. But then about like once a month, in alignment with the moon cycles, I go through all my old books and journals, whatever it was I was getting out, and I give specific things purpose that's kind of needed, or that is essential, or that I wanted purposely dig into a little bit further. And some of the other stuff, it's like, okay, that's good for now, I explored it, but it can go, so I'll burn it in a fire or something, and move on for the following month. And
Nice.
yeah, it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, like in that you're going through this entire process, and that is a big part of the integration. It's like, it's not just the medicine is great. It really is, it opens you up to all these things. But one of the things it's opening up to you is like, what's your medium to work with? And then it's ultimately yours in this integration process to work with those mediums, or whatever, if it is one medium, but you've been gifted with many.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. I think that's an important process, to be able to express things without also necessarily any attachment to what it might be. That's a good practice as well, to just let the experience happen, because that's where a lot of the magic comes from. It's like happy accidents, like Bob Ross might say, you know. And I think that that's great. Yes, it's just ultimately it's really fun. And so there's this element of freedom that comes from that experience. And then of course for me with visionary art, there is a language to art, so we're connecting with other people through our expression, and when it's refined in a way that more people can relate to it, then we're speaking about these experiences that are hard to speak of. We're relating to them in a different way where words sometimes fall short. So that's where music and the visual medium of art can come in, because sometimes these experiences or feelings are less describable with words.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just, some people are better at it with words than others. Some people can describe it well with words. I can describe it better with images and sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And different people have different mediums. Like Terence McKenna, I think, did a pretty good job at
Right,
describing some of
exactly.
these things, but that was his medium.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious, has anybody else influenced the type of art that you're doing? You may you stumbled across it through the use of psychedelics, but you've been in this field for 20 years now. How's it evolved, changed? What other influences have you had in this time?
Yeah, well, when I was first getting into it, like I said, I didn't really have much of an idea of what like visionary art. I didn't even know that term. And so we were listening to Tool, psychedelic rock band, and I hadn't actually even seen the album covers, and my friend brought one over one day, and this was after we had had like a few of our experiences. He brought it over and he showed me the one cover with Alex Gray's art on it for Lateralis, and I was like, wow, like cool, we got to check out this website. And I go to it and I was like, wow, there's someone making art like me in the world. Like I hadn't seen any other artists of that sort. Come from a small mountain town in the southeast corner of BC called Kimberley. It's in the Kootenays. And so back then we were pretty isolated. Like the internet was pretty new. I was more into like punk rock and metal, and I hadn't been to this psychedelic scene was not huge there. It's a bit more of a redneck town. And anyway, so yeah, Alex Gray was kind of the first psychedelic art I saw. And really that going to his website is what led to my awakening experience. There's this whole story behind that, like trying to get down to Brazil to do ayahuasca. Anyway, and so, and then over the years, like I said, I met up with a bunch of visionary artists right away, and I was seeing their art and was definitely like, yeah, these guys are getting it. So I think as an artist, we're always picking up from other things we see and then integrating our own way. Like, oh, I like that texture, or the way they did that glowing feature, or something about it, and then we try to replicate it, because that's how you learn, is actually often by copying other artists. And then once you've done that, it's like, okay, well, how do I take this and express it in my own way or in my own feelings? So there's been so many over the years. I would say when I got into digital art, I was really inspired by Andrew Jones, or also goes by Android Jones. I was doing more traditional medium painting, but I was kind of finding a bit of a difficulty expressing some of the layers that I wanted to. And I had been playing with computer art for many years, like since high school, but it was really like digital painting itself, like realizing like, oh, you can have a tablet that you can actually, with a stylus, like actually execute a whole other level rather than just using a mouse. And so then I started to get into digital painting in around 2008. And it's led to a lot of other layers of being able to animate and do motion graphics, and so for many years I've been doing that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, my partner, he does a bit of graphic design, and that's one of the things that he does, uses the tablet. My son gets like so excited about it and wants to like get involved, and so we had to get little apps for him to practice too, and it's fun.
Yeah,
it's catching on around here anyway.
okay.
What else is with the multimedia, is there a meditation part of that too? Was I
Mhm.
understanding? Can you speak a
Yeah,
little
for
more
sure.
on
Yeah, for sure. So it isn't really only psychedelics that have inspired me over the years. Like around a similar time that I started exploring psychedelics, I started learning about spirituality in another way and meditation. And I had done different practices, learning about yoga. And so those things become pretty integrated and have been more so over the years, doing Vipassana retreats. And so I have a really strong interest in metaphysics and meditation and really how we can get to this place of relaxation that opens our heart up, opens our third eye up, and kind of connects us to these more divine
that?
energies. And so I I wanted to create a multimedia experience that was kind of a meditation concert. So it is a fusion of like going to see a music concert or a movie, and it's also a meditation. So it has this vibe where it includes ambient music and it also has some uplifting, rhythmic music. And there's really a journey that I take people on. I should say my partner Jane is also involved in it. She has an introductory, like an intro to it. There's a meditation and she guides people and it sets the stage for what they're about to experience in this audio visual way. We also give a talk beforehand, kind of like we call it our little TED Talks, um, where I talk about my art and inspiration and metaphysics and psychedelics and cymatics and all these interesting things woven together about what my art is. And then my partner Jane, she talks about sort of everyday access to psychic abilities and how everyone can have these abilities. She's a somatic counselor, so she's really into that. And yeah, and then we take people on this audiovisual journey, which is like this meditation concert. It's pretty unique. I haven't seen anyone do anything quite like it before. Um, so yeah, it's been fun to explore that and build it up over the years.
Oh my God, I'm inspired to have Jane on now too. Talk about all these kind of psychic powers we can tap into.
Yeah, for sure you should. Yeah, she'd love it. Yeah.
I'm honestly a true believer in this, especially, it's much like Terrence McKenna said, there's just meditation is a great tool to get to these same kind of dimensions, but psychedelics are, a fast way to get there and get that impact so you can get back and use these other tools like meditation and get there and work within that space without always using the psychedelics. And that's one of the things that psychedelics introduced me to is all these different kind of abilities that we have, that maybe these mental health issues or the things that we always think are wrong with us are actually really what's right with us. And they are superpowers and these special abilities, gifts. If we could just see them as that and have a little bit more gratitude and be able to mindfully navigate these kinds of things so that it's not so it doesn't feel like so dangerous or uncomfortable and all of that. So yeah.
She's an amazing partner and ally in my creative process, and she's really tuned into that kind of stuff in a very grounded way. Actually, I think her ability to talk about it and guide people to an experience of being able to access your own sort of inner guidance, or whatever you might call it, your guides, your ancestors. She does inner parts work, child part work, and it's really amazing. So yeah, she's definitely an integral part of my creative process and even the show itself. And for sure, yeah, it's all about like understanding that we can access metaphysical energy, and there's this whole other field of energy around us that has different names. In my talk before the show, I talk about it as sort of like Wi-Fi that we can tap into consciously. Some people might refer to it as something like the Akashic records, but really there is just invisible information around us and we are interacting with it. So I think we can find ways of sort of practicing to interact with it and become more harmonious with our environment, our environment and ourselves in this way, which ideally will lead to more harmony and health with everything.
Yeah. No, he's so crazy, like, knowing that you're both in music and in art, like the words that you choose are very much in alignment with both, talking about like layers and of art and different mediums, but also these layers working with like this conscious Wi-Fi and the metaphysics. I'm just wondering if you can, dive deeper into these subjects for anybody who's new to these realms, or looking to dive in a little bit deeper as well.
Well, what's one of the specifics that you think you want me to talk about? Like choose one part of it.
Yeah, so let's talk about metaphysics and how it is that you're using it in your art, how it inspires you, how it's maybe rippling out into other areas of your life, or why you
Okay.
chose that.
Yeah, so metaphysics is the sort of, to put it simply, is the energy that we don't see but we often feel. It's the energy that guides our experience, that our etherical body is connected to, our energy system is connected to, that is surrounding us. In Star Wars, they describe it as the Force, so it surrounds us and binds all things together. And I really think that that's true. I think we can have experiences with this metaphysical energy all the time. It's connected to psychic energy, which we do just inherently, where people have all kinds of psychic experiences where it might be like, oh, you were just thinking about someone and then they phone you right away. And I don't think that's just a coincidence. Like, we do have those experiences for a reason. And so for me, how I express that in my artwork is primarily through colors and other layers of geometry and how I would describe energy. So a lot of my paintings have different types of layered geometry, sort of transparent layers and shapes that are coming off of trees or auras. I guess auras is another word to describe metaphysical energy around objects or people or creatures, where it might be like a glowing energy around things. And I feel like I really experienced this a lot, particularly through psychedelics. Like the visual aspect of it comes on pretty strong, where one can often start seeing patterns that are interconnected through various objects. So you might see the same pattern running through the well, here behind me, this is one of my older paintings. It's a bit less psychedelic, but it's sort of like the ferns have this fractal pattern, and then the trees going up have kind of a fractal pattern. So fractals are kind of one of the original forms of psychedelic art that I was familiar with. And that's just nature's natural geometry. I don't know if I've ever described fractals in that way, but that's kind of how I would. And so it's interesting because I feel like we definitely are feeling this energy all the time. You might go into a room somewhere and have a sensation depending on who's there. There's vibes that we get into based on music, based on circumstances. And then through different mediums with the psychedelics, different entheogens, they become more visible. Sometimes they're just inward, like we're seeing them inside in our third eye. And that's often where I go when I'm with psychedelics. I think in early days, I would have been more like having my eyes open and looking at what's around me, like the forest or whatever, and sort of tripping on that. But there's this whole internal realm that is pretty extraordinary. It's really this thing that if you've never experienced it, it is hard to describe. And I do think that's where visual art comes in pretty handy, even though I think it's still a lot of it is still pretty difficult to depict artistically, because it's like being able to see an inner realm that is so vibrant and often so bright and interacting with us in this way, and moving, that it's very hard to describe, but it's there, and it's a very obvious thing that's happening. And so many people are experiencing these metaphysical realms that are somehow inside but connect us to this it's like an inner realm that kind of connects us to this outer space realm, an interdimensional realm of metaphysics where other things are going on. People might experience connection to spirits or entities. Ancestors might visit them, and like what's going on there. So how do we express that? It often comes through in these ways where I think describing energy in visuals is is like one of the ways I express it, because I feel like nature is really relatable to most people. So that's why I've used it as a bridge to express these energies to people. So I'll take those bright colors and those patterns I might see in those realms and then express them on an image that it is nature, so it kind of overlaps with people's general experience of daily of life in nature. And yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know if that, hopefully that made sense to some people. Kind of went off on a couple tangents there, but
Oh,
it
I
is.
love it. It's fascinating and beautiful, even the way that you explain it. It's like it's very much is that, so within, so without, as above, so below. It's like
Mhm.
these fractals, especially using nature as that example. It's just a beautiful natural example of that, because you see it all the time. You see it in the leaves, you see it in the twigs, you see the fractal effect between our guts and the soil microbiome. It's
Mhm.
like there are these things that we just can't deny, and the fact that you're able to take it and also take and translate what you're seeing visually in these other worlds and share it with people, I think is pretty incredible. I'm curious too, like how you express differently through music and art.
Mhm.
What's that like for you? How does it change and differ for you specifically?
Yeah, sure. I think often it's pretty similar, um, though with music, like I'd say with the visual art, I've been on a specific track of tuning into and expressing a type of energy that could be described as peaceful. And usually when people experience it, it has the general impact is something of sort of a peaceful, loving, and calm experience. And I also make ambient music of that sort. I make some down tempo music of that sort. And then with music, sometimes I go a bit more outside of that. And I like to play around sometimes with like progressive rock or metal sounding music or post rock. And it has a bit more dynamics to it, where I guess you could say it's sort of exploring some of the more fiery energy, whether it is expressing specifically anger or anxiety or the shadow side, the deep those deep emotions that are part of our experience here. It's not all one-sided. It's not all love and light. Like it's very difficult to be here. So I think sometimes some of my music just explores a bit more of those other emotions. And so that's really cathartic for me. And I love listening to a huge dynamic range of music, where I get to, we just have so much availability now where we can explore that to listen to. So all of it is inspiring my art and experience. Yeah. So I think it depends on the what I want to do with it, because in these days, well, as a multimedia artist, there's like the commercial side of making things. um it's really interesting to think of like, oh, people sort of like staying on brand with what you're doing. Like you sort of choose a lane and end up in this category of expressing something that it's sometimes, I think, yeah, difficult for artists to get outside of it because they don't want to confuse their audience or whatever. I think I've definitely done that sometimes with my music. But it doesn't really matter. For me, the music is like I I music is a big part of my experience, and I go back and forth between the two creations. But because I do make a living from my visual art, like that is really where like my income comes from. uh I have sort of stuck to a general way of expressing, and I don't actually really feel the need to express the other emotions through my visual art. So it's not like I'm holding back on it because I'm trying to stay on brand or something. I actually don't usually. I sometimes have ideas for like some weird, creepy purgatory scene that I might paint. Like, wow, that was a weird thing I saw, but I don't really feel inclined to put the energy towards it. Whereas like music, it's kind of funny actually. Like whenever I'm just realizing like whenever I talk about this, it's also hard to attach specific emotions to sounds and types of music, because I think people often experience something like metal, like heavy metal, whatever, like in all the subgenres of metal or something, like anything with like distorted guitars and maybe some like aggressive singing, like as mean or angry and whatever, like those kinds of things. But I don't always experience it in that way. Like Tool is a really great example of a band where, sure, they have kind of a more they have a slant towards metal and kind of like I don't know. I want to say the word emo. I'd probably insult them, but like they're a bit emo for sure. Like Maynard's lyrics, they're emotional. They're like deep, touching these deep areas of the human and spiritual experience that are kind of like intense. And so, but I also like listening to that. Like that's why I said my awakening experience was listening to Tool. Like I've listened to really intense music with intense drumming and like heavy metal guitars, and I've actually experienced like in my inner realm like angels coming down and like fountains of light and just like totally beautiful, total full on divine beauty. And someone might listen to that and experience like purgatory. And I've had vice versa experiences. Like I could be having a psychedelic experience and listening to something totally calm, but depending on where I'm at, actually, like what I kind of maybe what my mind is going through, my whole mind, body, spirit thing needs at that time, I might actually see realms of purgatory, like these realms of horror that are part of this experience. But I do think in general, like what, the tone, how we set the tone with our set and setting does often guide our experience. So in general, calming music will lead people to a more calming and peaceful place. Heavy music, intense music might lead people to experience more heavy, intense things that are the part of the shadow side. And yeah, so it's awesome. It's awesome we get to explore this all. It's like the dynamic range of being human is that's it seems like that's what part of it is, we're just experiencing the yin yang, two sides of the same coin of this human physical experience.
Yeah, it's so true. It's one of my favorite teachings, actually, is the yin yang. 'Cause in the dark, you always got that little bit of light you can hold on to or go find, and same, if the dark is, yeah, in the darkness, there's the light. In the light, there's the darkness. And then I honestly think that what we're supposed to do is ride that wave in the middle. But so often, because life is hard, it's like, we'll just start surfing and we fall, end up with a saltwater enema underwater. It's like sometimes, it takes a while to learn how to, go through the ups and downs. But I really do believe that having these kinds of tools, being able to tap into your emotions, be able to express them in safe ways, know what's there, what's coming up, get curious about yourself. I think all of that's really important. I'm curious on the subject of set and setting. How do you prepare yourself for these kinds of experiences? How do you get your, setting in check? What do you do to get your mindset correct? Or, in a good spot?
Right. Well, if it's going to be some type of really deep journey, I'm usually just paying a bit more attention to my eating before. It also might depend on the substance that I'm taking, um, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms or other things. But generally, I try and overall, I'm eating pretty healthy and living healthy, but I might refine that a bit more and eliminate some things before certain types of journeys. So it's like preparing the body, the vessel, our temple for, because there's the whole integration, the communication with whatever medicine it is. And I think that our body, when it's clean and operating on a on that level, we can have a more clear communication with whatever's happening. even just saying that's funny though, because then it's like, well, what are you doing the other times? Like, why are you eating shitty? Like, because if you just ate better, you'd have that clear communication, which is true, which is why I generally am a pretty healthy person. But hey, I also like to indulge in some things sometimes that they have a different type of physical experience. So getting better at that. But yeah, so preparing the body, and as far as preparing the space, um, yeah, it's like, wow, there's so many different types of spaces it could be in. If it's ceremonial with other people, there's sometimes there it's God, it really depends. Like it's usually some type of like neutral environment. There might be a temple someone else has prepared where they have a space for people to journey in. Um, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have any artwork around that is like scary looking. Uh like that's what it's something. Oh yeah, like so I mean typically the artwork I have is like pleasant nature, visionary art or something like that. Um Maybe burning some sage or candles, saging myself, um calling in healed ancestors is something I feel like is important. I've had a lot of experiences of having ancestors visit me, and I like the idea of preparing the space so that if there are any visitations, that there's only benevolent energy welcome in the space. There's no malevolent energy welcome in the space, because I think, wow, yeah, we can really open ourselves up to different types of entities and energies when we're in this experience, and if we're not prepared for that, then it can go a bit sideways. And I've had some of those experiences for sure that are pretty weird. And so I like to also call in only benevolent energies into a space. And and that goes, all of these things could go for even just microdosing. Like if I'm making art and I'm taking a small amount, that's the same thing. I'm setting the tone for benevolent energies to come forward in that, and have this experience that's more aligned towards that. And then as far as music, again, it totally just depends what I'm doing or who I'm with. If there's a group of people, I would usually, if I were setting the music, it would be probably more ambient and relaxing for a journey. But then if I'm just by myself making art, I'll listen to whatever. It'll vary from intense cinematic music to some ambient flute to some Tool, some other post rock. I love it. I love just like, because I love, like, especially if I'm in my own space, I get into just this bubble where when I'm with the art and the music, I get to ride these emotions and have it just all be processed in this sort of extra way through the feeling of the psychedelics. And yeah, that's a bit of a description for you.
Would you say that you do most of your art when you're under the influence or through the integration process following?
Well, most of it's through the integration. I started off doing some paintings with some psychedelics, and it was really cool to explore that, what could come through. High doses are really hard to execute anything super meaningful to me or like translatable, because it's like it just like means totally other things while you're creating it. Um, I have over the years explored microdosing, taking smaller amounts or just smaller doses, microdoses, small, and that's really great too, because I feel like for me, that is an integration process where I can take some of the energy or things I experienced on the bigger journeys, which often now, if it's a ceremonial dose, like a big dose, I'm usually like lying down actually with a blindfold on. I'm rarely, and I don't even really do like huge doses. It much these days, like for, I don't know, it might be, I don't even know if last year I did one. I think I was like microdosing more and didn't do any big doses. And so it's usually in like a ceremonial context with other people. And yeah, I'd often be lying down with a blindfold on. So mostly, so I'm just not distracted by the exterior or what other people are going through, and it becomes more of an internal experience. So where I was like with microdosing and making art, I Well, I lost the track of what I was where I was going with that. Blindfold on. I don't know. Yeah, microdosing is oh shoot, I don't know.
Did
Yeah.
microdosing work and help through the integration process and
Oh,
with
the
art? Or was
integration,
it
right. Sorry, the expression of the integrated experience. Yes. So I feel like, well, microdosing just allows a bit of that energy to come through, uh, and it can also sort of like block out other things going on in my life. Like I'm not going to be thinking about like accounting or taxes or some, some weird shit like that I hate doing when I'm. So it kind of like it changes the channel, and I can have it also brings in a bit more some of those like happy accidents. I might allow myself like it can be a bit challenging even with the microdose, where I'll be painting something and I'll have like way too many ideas for this piece of art that I can like really execute in one image. And so I think visionary artists often have that difficulty compared to people that are painting something that's just based on realism, because we're expressing many more layers and patterns and different layers to this reality and when what we're seeing. So it's like, okay, how do I refine this and distill it into like one image, which I do find difficult at times. I get pretty indecisive, and digital art kind of lends itself to more indecision, but it also lends itself to a lot more experimentation. And so the experimentation is a great way, I think, to integrate these experiences, because I think we're kind of like, it's like a puzzle that we're trying to figure out, like, what does this actually mean to me? And like, okay, like what feeling what were my favorite feelings of these experiences that I would like to express for other people to possibly resonate with. And I think that's where, for me, I don't necessarily want to try to express the shadow parts as much, because I find other ways to integrate that than the art. Like I don't necessarily want someone looking at my art being like, wow, like that, like that's fucking weird. But at the same time, I also have a fine time looking at when other people do that, and I look at it, I'm like, yep, that's the purgatory realm. And you really nailed it there. Like I'm not going to put that on my wall, but um so there's different ways. People have different ways of having that integration into their expression.
Would you say that there's a perfect dose for yourself anyway, for getting those experiences that you feel most called to express in your art?
Um, I think for me, it's just a back and forth between being sober and being able to do it. Honestly, I do feel called to like, wow, how much can I express in a totally sober state? And so I'm mostly not on any substances. I guess that's not. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's not totally true. How many hours are there in the day? I really like cannabis. So cannabis is a huge ally for me. Although I really try to regulate it so that I'm only smoking in the evening. I don't usually go through periods where I'm smoking all day. So if I am in a creative process, I would say more hours in the day are sober, and then often I'll like smoke cannabis in the evening to kind of, it helps sort of catalyze a um uh well, it opens up that experimental process again, where I might like during the day there might be all kinds of like distractions of whatever else is going on. I have like my business to manage with the art, and there's just all kinds of things. So in the evening it's like, all right, time to just like kind of block all that out. Maybe I did a little bit of art during the day, or I was full day. But anyway, so cannabis is really great. I don't have like huge doses of it, and I go through periods where I'm not doing it at all. I just find it's really healthy to take breaks, because I do think it's actually addictive, because it can become this way of like, well, now I need to smoke it in order to have this experimental experience. Like if I don't have it, then I'm not going to be able to do it. And so once I start noticing that kind of addiction to it, then I'm like, all right, it's time to take a break, help my body feel better. Dreams start becoming different. And then as far as like other types of psychedelics with microdosing to integrate and be able to execute creativity, uh sort of depends on the substance. What's, I guess, like a typical microdose of mushrooms is it around 350 micrograms or milligrams? I forget.
For microdose, it's usually somewhere between 50 milligrams and 300 milligrams, something in there.
Yeah. So I'd like, yeah. It's funny. I'm like, yeah, I have these pills. Like, people are always giving me microdose stuff, and I'm like, I rarely read the amount, to be honest. I'm like, microdose, but it's true. It's true when you say that. I kind of just forget the amount, but I'm like, yeah, the smaller, whenever it's a smaller dose, I don't usually feel much from those. Like, I like to feel like the kind of higher microdose amount where there's a bit like I might start kind of tripping a little bit. And anyone that's done a lot of microdoses, sometimes it's all of a sudden like a macrodose. I've had experiences like that where like, for example, it's kind of more with LSD, mushrooms a little bit, where it's like it depends where the source is, where it's like I'm cutting it, I'm cutting a little sliver off of a tab. It's like, who knows how much that exactly is. And I've had some of those where it's like, wow, that, added with cannabis halfway through or like 4 hours in can all of a sudden turn into like a almost like a macro dose, like a full dose of LSD. So, which can be fun. It just happens. But yeah, there is kind of like, I would say like I guess like a cutting a sliver off LSD is like a tenth, and a tenth of and I guess, what is that? Like 10 micrograms is like a microdose, right?
Yeah, I'm not so good when it comes to the LSD ones because I do it in UI and I don't know how to like do that because it's such a
right. Yeah, it's funny.
small.
So yeah, cutting a little sliver off tends to be all right. I've had some, yeah, and then with mushrooms, yeah, that around the like kind of 300, 350 feels good. But then also sometimes I just have like the mushrooms, and it's like, all right, eat a little bit of this mushroom and see what happens. And sometimes it ends up, that's where it's a little more kind of experimental, of like, depending on the variety of mushroom, it's like hard to tell sometimes like what exact dose you're getting, but it's fine because any experienced psychonaut, I guess, anyone that's done them, it's like, all right, well, now you're just going to be in it for a few hours, but if it's too much, if it's too high of a dose, then it is hard to, I find it more difficult to create. And what can sometimes happen is I end up actually in a total meditative experience with my art, which is actually really cool, because then I'm like less hands-on, and it becomes this like more psychic interaction where I'm like in the realm of my art, and I'm sort of just like having this more in-depth communication with it and what it could be, and it's moving. And because I like to animate it, so I'm seeing all these like more movement to it, and like, oh, how would I animate that? And so pretty much all the artwork I do now, I'm actually thinking about how I'm going to animate it while I'm creating it. And so I have to save layers, and so I have to be pretty conscious about how I'm creating it in that way. So if it's too high of a dose, shit gets messy. And it's yeah, it depends. I can go off in experimental realms. Maybe I'll just start something new. Yeah, so not too high of a dose, not too small.
Yeah, I love that. And, I've definitely had those experiences where I've, overdid my microdose. It's like, I don't like to say I overdosed it, but definitely needed to, like, good thing I'm my own boss, because I wasn't any good for anybody.
Right.
When it comes to through the integration process, working on your art when you're, staying absent from any other, I guess, medicines or anything. And then there's also the meditation part, which can bring up inspiration. And you touched on that when you're not smoking cannabis, you dream. And that brought me to the question of, when you're in dream state, do you ever bring back anything from there? Have you had those kinds of experiences?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Dreams have been such a huge integral part of my whole life. I've been a really intense dreamer, a lucid dreamer. I have really profound dreams often, and they come into my artwork in a way. Sort of more through feeling. I don't think I've really ever expressed a specific vision from a dream, and that's kind of true with all my artwork, actually. I'm rarely expressing, like, one specific vision that I had, where it's sort of like a conglomerate of feelings and experiences and how to express it all together and capture a feeling. So there might be a dream-like feeling, but my dreams inform my life in a way where it's all connected. There's there's sequences of dreams that happen and messages that come through, so I pay attention to them, and they help inform my entire experience of being here, which is, the art is one section of. There's so many other different components to what my experience is here with, the different relationships I have with people, with how I'm living my life, my garden, this all just so many different things. And because I do often have really metaphysical dreams. Sometimes I've done psychedelics in dreams. I often fly in my dreams. I would say I'm trying to capture some of that feeling, very like sort of fantasy, dreamlike feelings that come through um, in that way. So yeah, there's a lot to it, and I do find sometimes when I stop cannabis, the dreams kind of become more intense. It kind of depends. I still have actually a lot of I don't know if I've tracked that to say like it's 100% true. I know I've heard other people say that, and then I think I'm like, yeah, when I stop, my dreams are intense. But then I also do often have intense dreams while I'm in a cannabis smoking phase. So I haven't like empirically mapped it out to be say like it's true one way or the other, but just kind of seems like that sometimes, that they're like maybe it's like a different type of dreaming experience, or also maybe I'm just able to remember it more in the morning. I have more of a clear memory of it. It's variable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. Like when times that I have quit smoking, I find that they do get a little bit more intense, and that I remember it more. But I do still get them when I smoke cannabis too, and they can still be intense. But I do have a harder time holding on. I'll be like, oh, that was weird, but it's gone a lot faster. I can't hold on to it the same way. And so doing dream work takes different kinds of medicines. I think cannabis just isn't that one if you're doing that kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean you're not going to dream, because it still happens. So I'm curious, what's in the future for you, Simon? What else are you working on? What's coming when it comes to art, music,
Yeah.
consciousness?
Well, I'm still working on my multimedia show, which is called Metagrove, and we were touring it last year a bunch, and we kept adding tours as we were having success with it. And so there's some shows coming up in March in the Kootenays, Nelson, Cranbrook, and Kelowna. People can check that out at metagrove.net. It's on my main website, which is artbysimon.com. And so it's sort of expanding on that. That's kind of my main focus right now, is what that is. And I'll be creating a second version of it as well. One of the big projects I'm working on right now is exploring how to get my audiovisual experience into dome theaters. So I want to create a version of my show, which right now is just on a typical like flat screen, and bring it into dome theaters. And I'm working on something. I have some ideas around how to create a more narrative concept that involves a bit of science and story, and also includes the purely like audiovisual psychedelic journey part of it. And I want to bring that into science centers, kind of have like a family friendly version. And so I've been talking to different science centers about that, like how to have a show, because I feel like there's a gap in communication with kids and youth, and even just kind of everyday people that aren't having psychedelic experiences. That's kind of been my mode for a long time. And again, that's why I use nature as a bridge, because I want to translate this feeling to people, and this experience to people that also aren't familiar with psychedelics. And there is a way, and metaphysics and spirituality is just, everyone's capable of tuning into that. It's what we are. And so I like the puzzle of thinking about how can this be expressed in a way that kids might enjoy it in like a science center. Like, how can it be this simple way? Yeah, and then of course nature, and tying it into nature, because ultimately, like, we're here because of nature, it supports us, and I hope we can all become better stewards of the earth. So I'm trying to bridge all those mediums together into a new experience.
Well, you're doing a really fantastic job of it. Like,
Thank
honestly, it's even the artwork behind you. It's like nature's breathing, and it's something that we forget. We forget that nature's alive. It's, all around us. It's connected to us, and we need it. As we've been growing symbiotically with nature. We're not separate from it. Even though there's a lot of people out there in these concrete jungles. Even though we've like that. What's that popular song about you pave paradise, put up a parking lot?
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter how much, it doesn't matter even with the kids today that are growing up and that's all they know. Because even in my generation growing up, and we would have kids come from the city. I grew up on like just off of a native reserve, so I had country all around me. But those kids that never experienced it, and this is like where they were going to go camping or something, it's like they still feel that connection. They understand they're not separate from it. But just like a psychedelic experience, when you go back to the city, it's like that environment isn't as supportive, so you fall into like the same old kinds of ways of thinking. And what you're presenting is this way of like really bringing it home. Like, everybody can have this in their home as a beautiful reminder. And and the more, I don't know, I think the more that people are inspired by that, I think it's going to have a huge ripple effect. So I'm really grateful for everything that you do, the way that you're expressing it. And I hope that this episode inspires more people to get involved, to start doing this kind of stuff for themselves, and to reach out and support you along your own journey too.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Like, as you said, we're in this, people ideally needs to connect with nature more. Like, we don't want to keep paving this paradise. And how can we do it? We're all living in some kind of hypocrisy. It's very difficult in this day and age to not be sort of a hypocrite to that. But it's like, but how can we also manage this experience to lean into ways that we can become more integrated with nature, that are more harmonious, so that we can build resiliency with everything we do, and we're just not destroying our home. So I think, yeah, you kind of nailed it there, and I'm grateful to be able to be doing this in my lifetime and have people appreciate it and resonate with it, and people like yourself that want to chat about it. So yeah, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, keep going for those kids. Dr. Seuss did a good thing. That man is a great example of this. He started out doing like advertisements for big oil and all that, and he's like, this is like just shit. This is going nowhere. This is going to wreck the planet. And then he started coming out with all these books for kids and understanding that kids were the way. And, and my son, he's 7 years old. He's been to science centers all around Canada, the US. That it's where he learns a lot. So, I really have, big, a lot of good vibes going your way for this. I really would love to see that.
Cool. Thank you.
And again, thank you. Anybody, I'm going to leave Simon's information in the description below. Check out his website, check out his art, go support him and all that he's doing. And and thank you again for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Bye for now.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.